Hello, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, college football fans across the nation and around the world. This is Tim May with the Tim May Podcast. Yet another version of this. I think it's been a pretty successful run so far. And of course, I'm going to call him my sidekick. What would you call yourself, Austin, when you're in the presence of me? What would you call yourself?
Yeah, I think sidekick is the right way. This is your show. I'm just along for the ride. I figured you might have some sort of airline or pilot. What am I? I'm the deadhead over here, or what?
You're the co-pilot.
Co-pilot.
There we
Okay.
go. You're the co-pilot, but you get to have the controls a lot because that's how you rack up hours being a uh, being a first officer or a co-pilot. And sometimes I need somebody to take over the plane because let's face it, it gets a little loopy.
The
But
tough part is that I've got this chair on my left. I'm in your normal spot. We can't seem to get in the same room at the same time this off season.
yeah, I know, man. I'll just right up front. I mean, my mom has been having some difficulties. I mean, she's basically had a stroke, and she's had a recurring problems from that, and it's. I've been trying to get to Texas as much as possible. That's the luxury of being in semi-retirement, is that you finally get to spend time with your mom,
Yeah.
who's like 1,000 miles away, and wish you'd spent this kind of time with her, been able to do this like 20 years ago. But
Right.
it is what it is at this point. I'm at Pinecrest Retirement Community, which, man, what a fabulous place. And I'm not just plugging it because I get no discount. Don't don't get me wrong, but it's just a fabulous place. They've got a rehab facility right, in the facilities here, and it's just great. My mom's lived here for like what 9 years, and it's just a tough time. But she's dealing with it. I'm dealing with it. She said hi to me this morning when I walked in. Didn't do that yesterday, so every day's a new adventure,
Yeah.
and we'll see where this one takes us. But I digress. Bottom line is, speaking of tough times, you get the news last week that uh, Jahsen Wint and Amir Riep, two guys who were expected to really step up and play big roles with the Ohio State football team in the 2020 season, were both arrested and charged with rape and kidnapping,
Hmm.
various degrees of that, and were arraigned. Obviously, Amir Reep's bond was set at $75,000. Excuse me, Jahsen Wint's bond was set at $75,000, and Amir Reeps is 100,000. But pretty promptly, Ryan Day dismissed them from the football team,
Hmm.
and uh, it's the way the details of the case are played out or spelled out. It's pretty heinous what they're accused of doing.
Yep.
But of course, in the American way, the American judicial system, you're not guilty. I mean, you're not guilty until proven so, and in a courtroom. And so these guys, are charged, and it's, as I like to tell everybody. I mean, I had two sons and a daughter, and if things happened the way the young lady alleges that they happened to her, being the father of a daughter, if that ever happened to my daughter, it would be tough. It would be. I hate to say what
Right.
the
Yep.
justice I would take into my own hands would be ridiculous if, in
Exactly.
fact, I thought it was true. And but it is a court of law that has to be taken in. But in the meantime, as you wrote, or as we had on Lettermen Row, Ryan Day faced his first true moment
Exactly.
of
Yep.
of put up or shut up, so to speak. What are you going to do with these guys? And like I just pointed out, uh, these guys were accused of something and arrested for it, but they haven't been found guilty of it. And kind of puts you as a uh, as a head football coach between a rock and a hard place, because that the headlines were all over the place. They were international,
Yeah.
and about what happened here, just based on the websites it showed up on as a top headline and things. But on the other hand, there are two guys who haven't been gone through the judicial system yet. They've just started. They just entered the portal. And I'm just wondering, Austin, what's your take on the swift action that Ryan Day took in terms of basically telling them they're persona non grata with the football program?
Yeah. When I was, initially reacting to that last Wednesday, um, posted my thoughts in the morning. That was maybe 12 hours or so after the warrants were out and after the reporting started, and it was hard for me to see that there was any other option for Ryan Day, for Gene Smith, for any Ohio State officials that were going to be involved to bring them back based on what they were accused of in that police report. It was so uh, graphic and awful, and
Yeah.
and thing is, things have really changed in this front. You talked about how tough it was for a coach. Even reporting on this stuff is completely different than 10, 20 years ago, and I had to sit there and think, well, you know, we can't initially just react to what this means for football. That's not showing the proper respect
Correct.
for anybody involved, and that starts with the victim. It does also include people that are not guilty of crimes yet, but the way that so what I was most curious about was if Ryan Day would wait until that played out, if they would just remain on indefinite suspension, or if what he read, saw, heard was enough for him to not care at all. And I tended to think that he would react swiftly. I didn't know if it would be. It was basically 25 hours after that warrant was issued for, I believe, Amir Riep, that he kicked them off the team, and he didn't have to do it that way. But if you were going to maintain this integrity of the program that he's worked so hard to build, that the people they're recruiting are all elite, top notch, which the guys that we have been dealing with frequently in these last few signing classes have all been held in that high regard. I don't know that there was any real choice. Certainly, Day showed no hesitation in the discipline that he put down, because it's hard to, even if they wind up being cleared of all charges, they were still in a situation that doesn't exactly bode well for having them around the rest of the locker room, in my opinion.
Hmm.
Now that's going to play out in the court of law, and they've got some really high-priced attorneys to defend them. But
Hmm.
when you just read
Yeah.
what's on the paper from the victim and that the police report shows, that's difficult to stomach. And as you said, I mean, I've got a 2.5-year-old daughter, and I think that even in that short time, that my perspective has completely changed on the way that these things should handle. That doesn't mean that in any circumstance what is alleged that I would ever have been okay with that. But man, your headspace is definitely a little different when you um, have been around your own young kids, as you said. And Ryan Day's got kids at home, and a wife that's heavily involved in the community and charities with children. It's just, man, it's that was kind of a gut punch all the way around for everybody.
Yeah. I can't imagine getting a story from my daughter that she could not leave of her own volition.
Hmm.
Now it took the police a week, I think, to come up, to finally opt to charge these guys. So there was some diligence done there, one way or the other. And as you know, Sam Szymanski is the lawyer for Jahsen Wint, and he says his client is absolutely innocent of these charges, that he's been devastated by this, et cetera. So we will see where it goes. Uh, yeah, it's like, but it's so much of today uh, is about public relations, for want of another term, and you know, just the focus that something like this puts on your football program, your business, whatever it is, wherever it is you're doing, you're doing your thing, whether you're working for somebody or you're playing football for somebody or basketball. It behooves, because the court of public opinion moves swiftly, a lot more swiftly than the
Well,
judicial system.
yeah,
It moves at literally at light speed. As soon as you read things, you immediately make up your mind without getting, in essence, the other side of the story. Uh, what the other side of the story is, that's going to be interesting. Let's just leave it at that. I mean, what could be the other side of the story?
yeah,
And a misunderstanding, whatever. I guess we're going to find out. But the bottom line is, the reason we're talking about it is because these two guys were Ohio State football players, and it had been a kind of a pretty quiet period when you think about it, about just bad stuff happening. And Chase Young's situation was totally different. That was him accepting a loan from a guy and then paying him back, but in essence going against NCAA rules, and thus having to skip 2 games in a year when he was running for the Heisman Trophy. That's a total different, bailiwick than this situation. This is legal, deep legal stuff where the two players involved are facing serious prison time if in fact they are found guilty of these charges. And it's it's kind of hard to wrap your head around. I remember when the Carlos Hyde thing happened. What was that? 2013.
Yep.
And were you here then? I don't
Yeah.
remember if you were even around then.
Yep.
What?
Yeah.
Yeah.
As soon as Urban got here, I followed his coattails.
Exactly. And I remember Carlos initially, Urban Meyer kicked him off the team, and then when the videotape surfaced, there was a videotape of the actual incident in a bar where he had been speaking to a young lady and she slapped him and then he slapped her back. I mean, everybody could see it. And in essence, no charges finally were brought in the matter because I think it was explained to the young lady that if we charge him, we also have to charge you for slapping him. But as I pointed out on television on Channel 10 that night with Dom Tiberi, I said, well, no matter what, Urban Meyer's not going to like what he saw on that video, which he didn't. And he suspended Carlos Hyde for 3 games. He was brought back on the team, but suspended him for 3 games. And some people thought that was too light and stuff. And so you never, in the court of public opinion, you're never going to win everybody over one way or the other. There are some people are going to look at it and what does this just mean to the football team and his chances of vying for a national championship, and others are going to be, fathers of daughters and mothers of daughters and daughters and sons are be going, are you crazy? Look, this is heinous what happened.
And I think
but
too,
then, like I said, I said, no one's been found guilty of anything yet. So you're, when you're a Gene Smith, when you're a Ryan Day, you're caught in the middle, and you do have to take action. You do have to show that this will not stand. Go take care of your business. When you take care of your business, if in fact you are found not guilty, maybe we'll think about things on the other side after that. But that's your status with the football team is a who cares right now.
Yeah, I think that, and there was a similar case with Storm Klein in Urban's first year, where there wasn't video. That was all based on the police report, and I can't remember. I'm trying to remember if Urban in Ohio State phrased it as a dismissal, or I think they did. I think that he had been kicked off the team, but as soon as the charges were dropped in that case, they allowed him to come back. I don't have the sense right now that door is open to Jahsen Wint and Amir Riep. I don't know that. We haven't had a chance to. Ryan Day's not talked about this publicly and said that he wouldn't. So it's kind of pointless for me to even speculate on it. But that's, you were talking about the relatively clean run that Ohio State's had, very, very much so. These have been really isolated incidents, which they should be, and you hope that they're on the decline permanently. You never want to have it. But as you said with Ryan Day, this is the first time that he's a high-profile incident that he's had to respond and set the tone for his program. I know that it's, it always seems like it's too soon to just start talking about football, but that is what you and I do for a living, and there is an element of this where, Ryan Day was not the primary subject of this story, but he is, the highest-paid employee in the state, a state employee of Ohio, right? His program is going to be impacted dramatically by this. It will reflect on him, the choices that he makes, how quickly he makes them, how, if he had let this drag out, because who knows how long it would take for the legal system to resolve this case. That's not a situation that anybody wants hanging around their program. So, Ryan Day has to have had a good idea of, where this fit in, if there was enough reason to wait it out. I'm not even talking about quality of the player. I mean, this is a position of need for Ohio State. He didn't let that factor into his thinking one way or another, because both of these guys are in the secondary as we talk about the football part of it. He chose high character, no police record against, and swift action, and I think that he deserves credit for that because it's not easy. The easy choice would have been to say they're indefinitely suspended, and we're going to let the police officers in the court of law handle this and then make the decision for us. He did not do that. He said, regardless of what happens in the criminal matter, those guys will not be back. And I think
Right.
that
Now, I've always explained to people too that there's a big difference between, like I said, the Chase Young situation, which was a violation of NCAA rules,
mhm. Yeah, he had no say over
and
that.
this, which is an alleged violation of criminal law. I
Right.
mean, this these are two totally separate situations. I think people out there understand that. I don't want to preach to anybody about. I mean, I think everybody, any kind of sane individual, understands the difference. And
Yeah.
there's something to be said by standing by your man, which in fact, you know, there was a Torrance Gibson situation with Urban Meyer, and he was upset by the way that escalated,
Hmm.
as you well know,
Yep.
because a fairly innocent situation ended up with Torrance Gibson, in fact, getting, for the most part, kicked out of school.
Hmm.
And Urban Meyer never quite wrapped his head around that. And there was some, whatever you want to call it, vengeance involved or whatever. But so there are all kinds of these things are never all the same. There are all kinds of levels to them.
Hmm.
And the people who are in charge, like a Ryan Day, he has to see what's in front of him, and for the most part, sort of immediately make up his mind whether he wants to let these guys be around the team while they go through their situation, or whether he sees it as a big distraction to his team. And it will be. It would have been,
Hmm.
and or uh, this has nothing to do with football. Like you said, I mean, these guys may never play football again anywhere. So,
Yep.
and they may play football again next year, depending on what happens with their court case. I would doubt, though, that football would be played at Ohio State. I could be wrong, uh, if you follow, but like you said, that's so far down the road in the list of priorities for these young men. It's crazy because they are facing serious charges, and we'll just leave it at that.
Yeah.
And with that said, let's jump into the football aspect of it. This is a hit
Yeah.
for Ohio State from a depth chart standpoint, from a couple of guys who've been brought along, especially last year, and played quite a bit. This is a hit, right?
I think that would be more so with Riep than Jahsen Wint. I think if you looked at there would be three guys heading into spring to really fight for two jobs alongside Sean Wade at corner, and
Yeah.
Amir Riep would have been one of them. I think I'm probably, maybe I'm not. I haven't touched base with you on this in a while, but I think I'm probably higher on Cameron Brown than a number of people are. I think we're on the same page there,
Yeah.
and I kind of like the versatility of Seven Banks, and I've kicked this around with Berm and Spencer as well. Like, where do you guys see it? Because I don't view myself as the greatest talent evaluator and filling out a depth chart in the world. I tend to defer to the people that are paid hundreds of thousands of dollars to do that. But the way that Seven Banks has bounced around and helped on special teams, maybe lining up some of that nickel, I felt like that could be a good spot for him because I think that Cameron Brown can be a primary outside cornerback.
Yeah.
So, Reep had a chance to do some of that. He'd also played in the nickel. That would have been a spot for him to compete. I had him third out of those three guys personally.
Yeah.
Maybe I was wrong, but I didn't think that Reep was going to play a real primary role. But in terms of the depth, that competition was yet to really begin heading into March and those key 15 practices where Kerry Combs is just getting his hands on those guys again for the first time. Obviously, Tyreek Johnson now becomes more important. But for me, to looking at both of them, I didn't think he had his chance to start some at safety. It did not work. He
Yeah.
showed,
That was 2 years. That was
yeah,
2 years ago.
yeah,
Yeah.
he showed a couple, flashes of doing some things. It looked like he could maybe be in that bullet role.
Right.
Um, but that's a position where I think Ohio State is actually relatively stabilized because you have Pete Warner there who did so much of it. If that position, as you always joke, if that B lights up over the helmet and if it really exists, but they've got
Yeah.
a number of guys I think around who can who can play that, especially Court Williams now that he's an early enrollee. I think he's tailor-made for that sort of role. But again, we're talking about we couldn't have ruled out either one of these guys actually playing for Ohio State this year. They were going to have a chance to compete. Went in the Bullet and Riep as one of those two other corners so
Yeah.
they don't have a surplus right now. We were heading into that first week of January when it was possible that the entire secondary could have been gone. A, Shaun Wade was important, but B, they were counting on the fact that Riep had been in this program for several years and had the experience and had worked with Combs and had all this other stuff seemingly going for him on the field alone, and that's gone. That's several years of investment in a guy that was just absolutely thrown away.
Yeah. And you remember Kerry Combs was pretty excited when he got Amir Riep, if you remember. I mean, he thought it, and this way I look at it. I mean, I look at those corner situations. See, I look at Seven Banks. Seven Banks reminds me of the Chevrolet engine when they first brought it to IndyCar back in the mid 80s. It was a great, fast, strong engine, but it needed to get some reliability to it,
This is your other podcast, Tim.
Yeah, I know, but my point is, I didn't want to call it,
Yeah.
It's like there are some guys that clearly have some talent, but they need to be reined in
right.
to a certain extent, polished a little bit. I think Seven Banks has got that capability. Cameron Brown, I like him. The reason I like him, like you just talked about a while ago, I did a little story on him for us a couple of weeks ago, like you referred to a minute ago. And what I like about him is he's very smart and clearly has athletic ability. He's a big guy, pretty big guy. So I think they've got the capabilities. And, Tariq Jahsen, we'll see where that goes. But I think they've still have, some depth there that they can lean on. And we'll see, how they manipulate things in the spring, et cetera. But there's a lot of guys that probably need to grow up to a certain extent on the defense in general and in the secondary in particular. And so I think you just hit on it. I think Seven Banks and Cameron Brown are a couple of guys that I think people are going to see a lot of, barring injury or barring some surprise of some guy rising through the ranks. And it's really funny because when I was doing my podcast a week ago with Anthony Schlegel, which I think is a must listen to.
God, it was really good.
Yeah, but it was cool because Schlegel, leaves no stone unturned. Matter of fact, he goes back through the field again plowing. We were sitting there and we were doing it in the corner of the Woody Hayes Athletic Center indoor field, and out there on the field throwing the ball around, were Justin Fields and some guys, and the wide receivers. And Chris Olave, who by the way is sporting a very stout beard now. And I said, man, I still recognize you. I still know who you are. And but he he always had that light beard, but now he's decided to go full bore, kind of like Chase Ferris.
Yeah.
And but I wish I could do that. I've got this little scrawny little gray thing going. But I digress. But I'm just I'm telling you, I stand by what I was saying on a podcast with you a couple of weeks ago, Austin. If they don't go giddy up again throwing the ball like they did, maybe not as much as they did in 2018 with Dwayne Haskins Jr., but buddy, there is some talent running around in the wide receiver, as they said in the Gomer Powell show, the wide receiver corps. There is some talent running around out there, and I'm not even talking so much about the young guys, Julian Fleming, Jackson Smith-Nigba, those guys, Mookie Cooper. I'm not even talking about those guys yet. I'm talking about the guys that are back, and then Jeremy Ruckert. Jeremy Ruckert looks like a big fleshed out wide receiver when he's running around. Just the options to just throw the ball for this team, to me, could be dynamite. And you were standing like I was, but I'm telling you.
Was CJ Saunders out there, Tim?
Wait,
was CJ Saunders out there?
I don't remember seeing him out there. The interesting thing about CJ Saunders was when Julian Fleming was talking about him, he brought up again what I wrote a story about, after the Big Ten championship game when he got up and gave that speech at halftime.
Yep.
The thing that jumps out to Julian Fleming about him is that he thinks this guy could be a hell of a coach. I go, man, that's not the first time that kid's heard that.
Right.
Yeah, I'm interested to see where the Saunders thing's kind of finally What do you think is going to happen there? Let's touch on that first, whether he'll get a 6 year or not.
I actually asked somebody who would know about that on Monday morning, and they're still waiting for final word on that. It's if they can get approval. I thought at the end of last year when C.J. Saunders participated in that senior day festivities that the writing was kind of on the wall, that the scholarship numbers were too tight. They had these new guys coming in, that maybe he wouldn't have the option from the Ohio State side to utilize that 6th year. But I think when they look at this now, and if you're Brian Hartline, you have Olave and you have Garrett Wilson, who's still just in his 2nd year, but now he's one of these veterans. You're not sure what you really have in Jalen Harris and Jalen Gill. They're certainly not really going to be fit into that leadership mold. If you've got these 4 young guys who we all know can play,
yeah,
but they don't have that coach on the field or that captain. I mean, C.J. Saunders earned that right for a reason last year before the injury, and then the second injury that kept him out all year. If you can have him now, and the numbers are in a situation that are favorable for him, you absolutely have to keep C.J. Saunders around. So there's not a verdict in on that. For somebody who, I'll put it this way, if the NCAA says no to a guy who is a former walk-on, who earned a scholarship and then became a captain, and they don't want that person representing college football for a 6th year, then no one should ever get a medical hardship again, because nobody deserves it more than somebody who went down the road that C.J. Saunders did. So I would have to hope that common sense prevails in that situation, and then Ohio State gets somebody who can really help set, he's.
Well, let me ask you.
Let me
ask you from another way, though. I mean, was Ohio State as aggressively? Were they as on board with him getting a 6th year to begin with as maybe he was? I mean, I got the impression that maybe that wasn't the case. That I'm not sure Ohio State. I'm talking about Ohio State like it's some big giant, but I'm thinking they kind of dragged their feet on it because I'm not sure they were going to have the numbers, that would have allowed that to happen, because you don't get to have 86 scholarships. You know what I mean?
Yep.
That was the impression I got, that this was sort of put on the back burner a little bit. Who's the guy that got the 6th year? I'm trying to remember. Has he already gotten a 6th year? Who am I? Yes. And so that's the impression I got, was that they were waiting for the numbers to sort of settle out. Isn't that the impression you had?
Well, I think it's both, Tim. That I don't think C.J. Saunders was fully on board. After that, second setback. Do I want to do this again? I mean, after that rise, he'd really accomplished something at getting that captaincy, and then to have 2 major setbacks with your knee, right in a row. I don't know that. I talked to him a couple times just on the field before games, October, November. I said, when are we going to see you again? It was like, maybe never, because it's hard what he went through. I think it's true that Ohio State wanted to know what their number situation was going to be like at wide receiver, and I think that C.J. Saunders probably wanted to know mentally. Like, there was a time I asked him, and he wasn't sure if he was even going to apply for it, and that this was just kind of casual off the record conversation, but I think he himself needed to be, and his family
convinced.
that would be good for both of them. I don't think it was one more than the other. I think they both needed to say, hey, are we going to do this or not? And then once you fully commit and then present your case to the NCAA, generally you're going to – these outcomes for injuries, there aren't a lot of surprises. Usually you're going to win those cases when it's well documented. And for him, not playing a single a single game last year, that should be a no-brainer. But...
that'd be in any other situation, that'd be a slam dunk, like you said. And and the thing is, this is another great example. We've seen guys come back from knee injuries and be better than they were before. I mean, the first great example of that covering Ohio State football for me was Joey Galloway. Hell, he was faster after his knee injury. And but every knee injury is different. I mean, there's no such thing as this injury was exactly like that injury, and the comeback from them. And sometimes, to be honest with you, sometimes guys press the gas pedal too early, and have to go back into the garage. And there's another stupid racing analogy, which makes
this is just cross promotion.
But but the bottom line is, I mean, a lot of the mechanical aspect of your body does it is a little bit like going back into the garage for a tune-up, or in some people's cases they get older in life after they deal with some of these things, a knee replacement.
Yeah.
So and that's pretty damn mechanical if you've ever seen one. But the bottom line is, yeah, you're right. I mean, how much effort, pain, whatever does he want to go through? Does he, how weight against getting that glory time to play football for Ohio State,
Right.
and then also the idea that there are, the QUEUE at wide receiver. It got longer, not shorter, after
Yeah.
last season.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm talking about a playing time, and there's some great players who are waiting to really come online. Like you said, I mean, when we were talking about the receivers last couple of weeks ago, I totally left out my favorite guy, Jameson Williams. And
Yep.
I mean, gosh, I expected him to get about 4 balls thrown to him deep in that game against Clemson. It didn't happen. But that I'm not calling the place. No, I'm just joking.
Well, the other
But
guy too, like we didn't talk about him, and every time that you and I talk about wide receivers or Berm is around, he keeps saying Cam Bab, Cam Bab, Cam Bab, and
yeah,
it's
yeah.
easy. I keep sort of pushing it out of mind a little bit because I've never seen him really do anything other than walk around with 3 straight years of knee injuries.
But people talk about it. But people talk about him like, holy moly, if he's ever healthy, look out, right?
Exactly, and that's not just. I mean, it's not just Berm that thinks that. It's not.
Right. I'm
Brian
talking
Hart,
about him from the team. I'm talking
Brian,
about
yeah,
players on the team.
other
Yeah.
guys, Brian Hartline, they all rave about this guy, and this Johnny Dixon. You were talking about Joey Galloway. Johnny Dixon to me is now sort of the prime example for
Yes.
whether it's C.J. Saunders going through it, who would have seen Johnny Dixon struggle for years trying to get healthy, or Cam Babb, who had a little crossover there late. I mean, these guys know what can happen for you if you stick with it. That maybe someday that luck is going to turn for you, and you're going to get to show your potential. You're going to get to make big plays in the horseshoe, and both of those guys can do that. I think of the two, that Cam Babb would have the higher ceiling of over C.J. Saunders, but Saunders' value to me, as I said earlier, is more about being you have Hartline, you have Keenan Bailey, and then you have C.J. Saunders acing every question that you ask in the meeting room and grinding through every single rep that is available to him and not putting footballs on the ground, and maybe even helping in the return game, which we've seen in the past from him. I mean, there's a clear role for him.
Yes.
It's not going to be 25 catches or 5 touchdowns maybe, but it could
Agreed.
help. It could help Julian Fleming do that. It could help Mookie Cooper make a transition, and I think that's sort of what everyone has. That's the mindset mentality that everyone sort of got to with C.J. Saunders, and we'll see exactly. I don't know. There's no way to predict when that will be announced, but I know that it hasn't happened yet.
Yeah. By the way, I didn't get to talk to you since, because you and the owner Will Crawl and Verminology, y'all took off to the Bahamas or something for
yeah.
for that's what always, my wife always got upset, when I was full-time Ohio State beat writer for like 37 years at the Dispatch. I mean, as soon as you'd go on vacation, something would happen.
Gosh.
I mean, it was like clockwork. And you guys are sitting in the Bahamas and you're trying to have a good time, probably even play some golf, or
we did play some golf. Yep.
Go spear fishing, whatever you do down there, and conch shell hunting. And boom, the news of last week comes out of thin air like a lightning bolt. But it is pretty funny, man. It has turned into a 24/7, 365 beat.
Yeah.
It's ironic, right?
It's really and nobody ever wants to hear someone in our profession complain, because we have a dream job, and we all know it.
Correct.
We cover sports, and the fact that you might have to take a couple hours on vacation to do work, hey, that's a small price to pay for the other perks of our job. But it never fails. Like, when you look at the calendar, you thought this week, okay, recruiting is over. There's a little bit of basketball going on, but it's not, it's the middle of the Big Ten season. It's not going to make or break anything if we're gone. The coaches can't go on the road, so it was good for Berm. A little bit of a quiet period there. Spring ball still a couple weeks away, but it almost doesn't matter when you go. Something's going to happen. I thought Allie and I tried to take a little getaway after spring ball last year, and we hit the road, and we're 45 minutes out of town, and I get a message that Matthew Baldwin is about to hit the transfer portal. Like it's like there's a beacon or something that as soon as you or I or Berm or Spencer are outside the city limits, something is going to happen with this beat. And it's also a great thing that there is so much interest that I want to cover it. You and I are very competitive people, and we don't want other people to be doing that. And
Right.
and that we don't turn that off on vacation.
Nope.
You don't turn it off when you're in Texas, and it's also there's just I got it blows my mind because when you started in your career and even when I started in mine, the technology wouldn't have allowed you to do that. If you were going on vacation, then you were turning it off completely. But this team, the interest in it, and the fact that you can, work while you're gone has changed everything. And I don't know if it's a good or bad thing that we could cover it from the Bahamas at that hotel or monitor it while we're playing golf down there at Royal
Yeah.
Blue, but it's definitely wild. I'm sure for you, even you think back to the equipment that you used at the start of your career to what we can do now, and even just sitting here
Yeah.
having this podcast, it's almost
Oh, I
unthinkable.
once I once dictated a story from the payphone at Acadia National Park camping area. So, I mean, I've got all kinds of tales from having to deal with situations on, while you're gone and stuff. But, you guys, y'all had to wait for the float plane to get there, So I understand. I understand. Hey, Austin, it's always a pleasure, my man. Anything else you want to talk about before we call it quits on yet another Tim May podcast?
Yeah, I was thinking, you know, my mind was kind of racing there with the secondary, and we switched to the passing game. It's it's interesting to me to look now at this Clark Phillips situation
Yeah.
where Ohio State lets him get away, and if that kid had taken a couple more days, or obviously he wanted to stay closer to home. I think that's sort of the moral of that story with him going to Utah. But man, that kid was going to have an opportunity to really compete for a starting job right from day one. And the fact that he kind of got away, when we look at the depth now, especially that move in hindsight is going to be pretty significant. It puts a lot of pressure now on Legend Cavazos and Ryan Watts. Those guys are they did enroll early. They are on campus. Kerry Combs is going to have his hands on them. Who knows how quickly he can get true freshmen ready at that position. That's not something he's really done much of in the past with Ohio State. It's taken some time to develop and get them ready. And so that puts the real spotlight then for me when it's March 4th or 5th, whatever that first day is that we're going to be out there for spring ball. Can Tyreek Johnson finally be that guy that people expected him to be when he's a 5-star recruit coming out of Florida? Is he going to even help in the depth? Is it going to work out for him at Ohio State? He's going to be one of the most fascinating guys to watch in March, I think.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, that story I did about Paris Johnson talking about, the reliving or uh, dredging up that great line from Taylor Decker about iron sharpens iron when he was going against Joey Bosa. I mean, we're gonna see iron sharpen iron when it comes to the guys on the outside and the defensive backs, because it's a story I wrote a couple of weeks ago about Julian Fleming. I mean, I made up that new acronym ACAC,
Yeah.
which is acceleration after the catch. I mean, I know yards after the catch. That translates into that, but I just thought I'd be clever with ACAC, which is probably not very clever. But I mean, I'm telling you, these defensive backs have got their work cut out for them in those one-on-one, could be embarrassing situations. We'll see how it goes. But these young guys, these young receivers are no joke, man. And like I said, Justin Fields is going to be. I mean, he looked the other day so sharp, just throwing the ball, and we saw him develop from one week to the next last year into a better passer, almost from play to play, but series to series. And they're really going to, I think, lean on that, because the peril of him running is obvious to everybody now.
Yeah. Yeah.
Of what it can mean to you when you really need him the most. And so I don't know. I just think it's going to be as interesting a spring as there's been. And I've always enjoyed spring football because that's where you see guys really make their moves. And by moves, I mean either up or down the depth chart.
Yep.
And they become almost okay, you're from now, and you're pretty much, we're thinking about you on special teams. You don't really have what we need from a play-to-play, day-to-day situation in the secondary, in the defensive line, in the linebacker core. There aren't a lot of defensive linemen playing special teams coverage. I understand that, but you know where I'm going. Yeah. And so that's what makes spring special. I hope we get to watch more spring drills this year than we have in the past. We'll see. You know, I thought we had a shot last year with Ryan Day, but it didn't really work out like I thought it would. I think it behooves them to let us watch, you know, instead of just hear things and report things. I've always put that forward. I mean, the old saying goes back in the day when Earl Bruce was there, and then the first days with, you know, basically most of John Cooper's era, and even the first year or so with Jim Tressel, you have to go to practice pretty much every day. So there were no real surprises, and until somebody decided they would do a play-by-play recall of down distance formation situations under Jim Tressel, and he said, well, if you guys can't police yourselves, then you can't watch practice. I mean, that was kind of paraphrasing there, but you know, he doesn't understand that, you know, me like Lettermen Row versus Cleveland.com. That's like Michigan versus Ohio State. It's not like Michigan's or Ohio State's A team and its B team. You know, I mean, we all answer to different bosses, different coaches. You know, like we answer to Coach Will Crawl.
That's
you know,
right.
and that's tough. You know, you either get invited to the Bahamas or you don't, is what I found out. No, I'm just messing, man. Just messing. I couldn't have gone. Hey, I couldn't have gone anyway. Just joking. But hey, ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much if you sat through this entire Tim May podcast. I thought it was very intriguing, very enlightening, and as far as prying back the cover too about where Ohio State goes forward after this real tough situation Ryan Day had to deal with. The toughest of his coaching career so far in terms of dealing with personnel and pretty much having to wave goodbye to a couple of guys who showed some potential, different levels of potential. But, you know, until next week, and I really appreciate Austin, I call him Boston Ward, coming on, my co-pilot, my first officer, the guy that flies the plane probably better than I do, but I get to make all the landings. Until next time, this is Tim May with the Tim May Podcast. We'll see you then.
Thanks for watching. Subscribe below to get the latest videos from Lettermen Row.
We got Letterman Live, we've got the practice report, we got rapid reaction. Hey, and you know we got Buck IQ with Zach Bourne.
For sure. We got recruiting breakdowns with Berm. We got whatever you need. Ohio State football and Ohio State athletics, we've got you covered here at Lettermen Row.